The Leslie Marshall Show, a true democracy in talk radio. Of, for, and by you, the people.
Mark, I don't hear sound.
Live from our nation's capital, it's Deadline DC
No.
with Brad Bannon.
I hear it.
Welcome. Hi, I'm Brad Bannon. I'm the host of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I'm a national Democratic strategist and pollster, a columnist for The Hill in Washington, D.C., and a political analyst for News Radio KNX in Los Angeles and CTV News. If you want to read my columns in The Hill on the presidential race, the best way to do that is to go to muckrack.com/Brad Bannon. We have two great guests today. In the first half hour, our guest is Mica Soellner, who is the Congressional Reporter for Punchbowl News. Then in the second half hour, our guest is Tara Devlin, host of the Tara Buster podcast. And of course, we are joined, as always, by my intrepid executive producer, Mark Grimaldi. Before we bring on a first guest, I want to remind you that Mondays on Deadline DC, I bring you the people and players behind the politics and policies that drive our nation forward. To start off the show, we have this clip from Kamala Harris's acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention.
And know this, I will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend our forces and our interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. I will not cozy up to tyrants and dictators like Kim Jong-un who are rooting for Trump. Because, you know, they know he is easy to manipulate with flattery and favors. They know Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat himself. And as president, I will never waver in defense of America's security and ideals, because in the enduring struggle between democracy and tyranny, I know where I stand and I know where the United States belongs.
That was Vice President Kamala Harris giving her acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention. Our guest in this half hour is Mica Soellner, who is the Congressional Reporter for Punchbowl News. Mica, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start with this. You spent the week at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. What was the mood there?
Yeah, I would say the mood was very energetic. A lot of excitement. I think that there was a large swath of coalition for Kamala Harris and support for her. You know, there was a lot of enthusiasm, I think, especially during her speech at certain points, especially when she hit on foreign policy too. I mean, you just played the clip of her, but I do want to say, I would say the biggest applause line was definitely the part where she talked about a potential ceasefire deal in Gaza. I know that's been a big sticking point for the party, and we didn't see as much outside of the convention in terms of demonstrations related to the war and everything going on in the Middle East as was anticipated.
That's curious, because you would thought that at the Democratic National Convention, the delegates there would be most preoccupied with domestic issues, the economy, the environment, and so forth. Why do you think she got such a big response talking about national security policy?
Yeah, it was very interesting. And she went on for a while. And I think it's because, you know, I think that's largely the biggest issue right now hitting Democrats is everything going on in Gaza, and going back to domestic issues. Outside of that, it would be the border and these other issues that Republicans are hammering Democrats on. That's not to say that she didn't touch heavily on domestic issues such as the economy, and she spent a lot of time talking and differentiating herself from Donald Trump. But I would say VP Harris's speech was largely painting herself as a center-left candidate, which she is going to need to do in order to turn and get the voters that she needs in these swing districts who are a little bit more independent-minded, and possibly even some frustrated GOP voters.
On Monday, the convention, the big speaker was President Joe Biden. And it was really a political valedictory, talking about his departure from the candidate scene, his focus on the remaining few months of his presidency. And I imagine it must have been a very good, very difficult speech for the president to give, because essentially he was pushed off the stage. And one of the people listening to the president's speech was Nancy Pelosi, who played a big role in substituting Kamala Harris for President Biden. What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clearly, the Democratic National Convention was supposed to be President Biden's convention just roughly 2 months ago, maybe less than. So it's clear that, there's some challenges there, and there was a lot of backroom, issues going on with Biden being at the top of the ticket. And we saw so many in his party asking him and demanding that he step aside in order to save their own chances of flipping the House and keeping the Senate. So there was a lot of worry about that. In terms of Speaker Pelosi's relationship with the president, it's been very interesting to see Biden advisors coming out saying they're not trying to start a fight with her right now. I mean, I think that's telling. And I actually tried to ask President Biden last week when I was out with him if he's spoken with the former speaker, but he, didn't answer that question. So this has been a topic that I think has kind of raised a lot of palace intrigue on Capitol Hill and in the Beltway, but I'm not sure, how much concern there is outside of DC in terms of their relationship.
Now, do you think the president is going to spend a lot of time in the fall campaigning for his vice president and the rest of the Democratic ticket, or not?
I think it's hard to say, and I think it'll be interesting to see what he does decide to do. He could decide to go quietly, or he could stay involved. But I think as of now, we're seeing, his campaign team has essentially all, transferred over into Kamala Harris's team now. So I think it's just like her show right now at the moment in terms of who's doing what. And I think she's got enough help, via her relationships on the Hill or outside, people that are helping her. I mean, we saw a whole trove of people who are all Team Harris. She has the support of a lot of Hollywood elites and, other people that have, raised excitement about her. So I really, to be honest, I'm not sure what the president is going to do, but I really don't think that she would even need his help.
Now, you cover the House of Representatives for Punchbowl News. It's interesting that even though she's not Speaker anymore, she's Speaker Emerita, she still obviously yields a lot of power in the House of Representatives and nationally in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no objecting to the power and the influence that Nancy Pelosi continues to have on the House of Representatives and also Democratic Party at large. I mean, she is a significant figure that has such a strong level of influence. And, she's been in the shadow of Hakeem Jeffries, too, as he takes the reins and the new generation of Democratic leaders step up. So she's still very much in the shadows, and her opinion carries a strong weight.
Okay, and let me ask you this question. There were several former Republican representatives speaking at the Democratic National Convention. I remember one or two Democrats who spoke at the Trump convention, but they seem to have a pretty good turnout of former Republicans. Do you think that will have an impact on the fall campaign?
I think it's interesting. I actually asked the same question to Democratic Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar about what he thought of these speakers, and he talked about how he was friends with Adam Kinzinger when he was in the House, and he thought, he's hoping that it could have some sway on some of these voters that see someone within the Republican Party going out against Donald Trump. But I'm going to add that a lot of these people have already been vocal against Trump for a long time, and they've been largely rejected by the Republican Party as well. So they will have zero sway on the base. I think I can say that with pretty much any clarity. They may impact one or
We're
two.
going to have to go to take a short break for our radio listeners. Our guest in this half hour is Mica Soellner, congressional reporter for Punchbowl News. We'll be right back right after this very quick message for our viewers on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Our guest in this half hour is Mica Soellner, congressional reporter for Punchbowl News. Mica, again, you cover Congress for Punchbowl News, and a couple of months ago, while Joe Biden was still the designated Democratic nominee, many House Democratic members were not particularly enthusiastic about his presidential candidacy. Is it true? There seems to be an upsurge in enthusiasm among Democratic House members now that Kamala Harris is riding high. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say that there's been a significant shift in the House, particularly among these vulnerable Democrats that were worried that Biden would bring them down uh, and have a strong down ballot impact. But, I think that we also need to remember that right now, Harris is still relatively new. She still has a few more months to make her case and lay out her policy vision to the American people. And we'll see what happens there. I mean, there could be some opposition, and not every single Democrat that was opposed to Biden has backed Harris, especially these most vulnerable House members, in Washington State and Alaska, and then Jared Golden in Maine as well.
And Senator John Tester, who was a very difficult reelection campaign in Montana, also did not attend the convention, I believe.
Yes, it was interesting to see the approach from these in-cycle Senate Democrats, I would say, because you mentioned Tester. Sherrod Brown of Ohio also did not attend. But we saw some people that are facing tougher races actually speak at the DNC on the national stage. So Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, they actually took the stage to make their case in terms of why voters should support Harris. And so it seems like there's a split there in terms of who wants to attach themselves to the top of the ticket and who doesn't.
And the secret seems to be, given the absence of Sherrod Brown and John Tester, that if you're in a red state, you're trying to keep a low profile while the Democrats meet in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's very accurate.
Do you think, now I've read a story somewhere today that House Democrats are piling on to campaign with Kamala Harris. In fact, he's actively reached out to them, whereas there wasn't that kind of relationship during while Joe Biden was on the top of the ticket. Do you see that in your observations?
Yeah, I think Kamala Harris is working hard to establish and reassure her relationships on the Hill. I mean, that's been a big change. We heard this from some of the key groups that were supporting Biden before, but raised some concerns. And it's the groups on the Hill, like the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Pacific American. The Asian American Caucus. And so, a lot of those chairs said that Kamala Harris actually called them the day after that she announced her presidential run to make sure that she, has their support and what she can do to assure support of those groups and their respective demographics.
Okay, we're going to take another short break to bring back our radio listeners. Our guest in this half hour is Mica Soellner, Congressional Reporter for Punchbowl News. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. And I want to welcome back especially our radio listeners. Now, for our radio listeners, if you want to watch us as well as listen to us, you can do that by going to twitter.com/Brad Bannon. At facebook.com/Deadline DC with Brad Bannon /videos, and also on YouTube at youtube.com/Deadline DC. We're back with more of our segment here with Mica Soellner, the Congressional Reporter for Punchbowl News. Mica, let me ask you this. What are the prospects for Democrats taking back control of the House of Representatives? My reading is, at least in the big picture, looking at the national polls, the race is very close. And usually Democrats need to win the popular vote nationally by 6 or 7 points to take control of the House. What's your take on the race for control of the House?
Yeah, the race is going to be really close. And one thing I'm hearing from members and from my own observations as well is that a lot of these, the control of the House is really going to lay in actually the two bluest states in the nation, New York and California, because they have the most vulnerable seats. And a lot of Republicans right now, based off the last cycle of them being able to take a lot of these open seats and also oust, a few Democrats at the time. So those are two states to definitely watch in terms of how they're playing. In California, I can say that from, Democrats I've talked to there, they say that Harris at the top of the ticket will have a impact, and it could definitely sway some of these seats, especially with her long history in the state, as well as, her popularity being from Oakland, and also just her long political career representing California. So that could help them there. So I would say that it's very close, and we'll have to watch some of these key races.
Okay. Now, months ago, well, early this year, when the Republicans were having a very difficult time picking a speaker, and they went through speakers and countless arguments, I wouldn't have thought that they had much of a chance to keep control of the House, which is a observation on not making early judgments before you see things panning out. How have the Republicans recovered from what I would say was fairly inglorious tenure holding control of the House? Is it just anti-Biden sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, things that happened 6 months ago is a lifetime in politics, I would say. So I
Yeah,
think
it
a lot of
sure is.
people's memories are short. Because I thought the same thing, when all of the speaker drama was happening, Republicans are greatly ruining their chances of holding on to the House or expanding their majority. But a lot of that has calmed down, I think, because of the attention that's been on Democrats lately. And also, Speaker Johnson really hasn't had many tests in recent months in terms of having any internal infighting, even with the members of the Freedom Caucus and the hard right faction of the GOP conference. There hasn't been that much uproar in terms of passing another CR, and we may see that again in September. But as of right now, I think all eyes are on November, and we'll see if Republicans can help themselves, especially Trump, in terms of what he can do by them. But I think that people are kind of laying low and staying quiet, and hopefully letting more drama just kind of be on the rise for the opposing parties.
Now, let me ask you this question. If you look at the national polls at least, and I'm sure this is true in a lot of the targeted House races where Democrats are vulnerable, the economy is a big issue because voters are unhappy with the economy. They go to the grocery store every week and they're paying increased ridiculous prices for feeding their families. How do Democrats in marginal House seats how are they trying to cope with that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of detaching themselves from the administration and, some of their more unpopular policies. I mean, also just, I think they're focusing on those kitchen sink issues like you mentioned in terms of the economy and inflation, and, making promises, but also saying that they're not afraid to buck the administration where they can in terms of some of these issues that have been, highly unpopular. And that I am also just going to add very quickly that I know that, Harris being a new candidate has, helped some of those in these tough races, but she's also going to have to try and detach herself from policies under her administration alongside President Biden.
Now, back in 2022, the Republican House members were riding high in the early part of the year. Then the Trump-appointed Supreme Court issued their decision in Dobbs, which led to several states, I think about 20 of them actually, enacting very severe restrictions on abortion access. And I think the uproar of the Dodd decision did accounted for a big part of the reason why Republicans didn't win a big majority in the House, and they won a bare majority, which ended up causing them a lot of problems. My question to you is abortion as big an issue in House races as it was in 2022, or has the economy supplanted that?
Yeah, I think abortion is still going to be a big issue, especially when you see some of these more harsher policies enacted in red states like Texas and Florida. So those are going to be a huge play in those states that have already seen actions from Republican administrations further make those restrictions on abortion and reproductive freedoms. I will say that it's also an issue that a lot of Democratic challengers and incumbents are, making in their own races, in certain Senate races, and painting, their opponents as being extreme on abortion. So it's an issue that Republicans have had a hard time grappling with in terms of what the right message is for them. But we've seen a lot of them kind of stay quiet and distance themselves from some of the more extreme measures that have come out of, various states.
Okay, and one last question about House races. So we hear a lot about money, not only the money that the candidates spend, but the money that the big super PACs spend. How are the Republicans and Democrats running for the House fit for money? They're both raising a lot of money. Does one party have dominant financial power over the other?
Yeah, Democrats have a significant fundraising advantage right now. We see the House Democratic campaign arm at least completely outraise the Republican campaign arm in the last few quarters, and I think that's become a big problem for the GOP. We saw NRCC Chair Richard Hudson actually say behind closed doors that this is actually an issue for them. So we're seeing a definite fundraising advantage for Democrats, but we'll see how that money is spent and where that money goes, and if this momentum keeps up as well.
Okay, Mica, thank you very much. Our guest in this half hour was Mica Soellner, political reporter for Punchbowl News. We'll be back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon and Tara Devlin, the host of the Tara Buster podcast, right after this very quick break.